Tēnā koutou. Katanga te titi, katangi te kaka. Katangi hoki aho, tehi mauri ora. Ko te mihi tuatahi, ko ranganui roa ko papatuanuku. Ko te mihi tuarua, ko te whare e tunei. Ko te haukainga ngā mihi, mahana kia koutou. Ko te mihi tuatoru, ko ngā mate o hare atura. Ko te hinga ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko waio, ko auraki te maunga, ko waimakarere te awa, ko naitahu te iwi, ko takutai o te titi te marae, no ototahi aho, ko Lucy Kaiser takuingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So in the spirit of the Global Platform's theme of inclusivity this year, I wanted to introduce myself and welcome you all in my native language of Te Reo Māori. So that introduction acknowledges those who have come before us, the place in which we're in right now, and the local people, our hosts, who have welcomed us here today. It also gives you a bit of background about me, the mountain I come from, the river I come from, my iwi or my tribe, Ngāi Tahu, the marae I come from, the city I come from, Christchurch in New Zealand. And also, finally, my name, Lucy Kaiser. In a more informal setting, we might say something a bit more simple, such as kia ora I homa, or hello, my friends, and you would respond with kia ora. So should we give that a try? Kia ora I homa. Kia ora. Beautiful, ka pai, well done, thank you very much. So my name is Lucy Kaiser, and I'm presenting here today on behalf of myself and my fellow colleagues, Christine Kenny, Suzanne Phibbs, Steve Matthewman and Hugh Bird on some of the research programs that we're working on, which are either led fully or partially led by indigenous Māori researchers. Through extensive participatory research conducted in partnership with our communities, we have identified a range of key risks that Māori and non-Māori need to be planning for now if we are to remain physically, culturally and spiritually resilient. Great. Thank you. Okay, so you may be wondering what a marae is, which is going to be the central focus of my talk today. So Māori marae are community centres that incorporate built infrastructure, social networks and spirituality. It's where we make important decisions through hui meetings, where we mourn our deceased in tangi funerals, where we hold our ancestral knowledge, and where we mobilise and provide accommodation, food, social, cultural and psychological support for communities that have been impacted by disasters. There's increasing recognition within DRR of the key role that marae have within a disaster context. However, risks that threaten the capability of marae to support the wider community during disasters are not well understood currently and have received little attention within research and emergency management practitioner circles. I'd like to briefly go into a bit more depth with a case study on how a marae in the South Island of New Zealand participated in the response and recovery of a community following the 2016 Kaikoura earthquake. So the earthquake was a magnitude 7.8 and it caused widespread devastation and cut off all road access to coastal communities for an extended time. In its capacity as a welfare hub, Takahanga Marae provided 10,000 meals, sheltered 500 people and registered 1,000 people in a great demonstration of hospitality to the wider community and the many tourists who'd been stranded in that town. The local tribe Ngāi Tahu were able to provide helicopters to conduct 50 evacuation trips for people following the earthquake. The tribe also connected with key disaster response organisations and within 24 hours of the earthquake were able to create a well-coordinated response. The success of local marae and iwi in the disaster response is largely due to resilient cultural attributes that enable quick and effective mobilisation, as well as a long history that we have with the land that have resulted in Māori being intimately familiar with risk. So a Māori perspective on risk. So Māori perspectives on risk are holistic in nature and in line with the wider Māori view in which there is no separation of the physical and spiritual worlds. We're all descendants of the land that we live on. For an example, damage from a landslide may be perceived as a loss of spiritual Māori or life force. The health and resilience of a community is inextricably linked to the health and resilience of the land. Knowledge of risk are passed down through stories and songs of past hazard events. Many of the Māori place names in New Zealand reflect risks. Horowhenua, for example, translates to landslide, which acts as a warning for future generations about the local hazard profile. Funding from the National Science Challenge, Resilient to Nature's Challenge, provided us with the opportunity to work with Marae representatives to help unpack the risks that Marae have been threatened with. The project Whakaoranga Marae has been exploring factors that influence Marae resilience in the context of significant hazard events, as well as documenting risks to Marae. The second Marsden-funded project, Power Politics, Electricity and Sustainability in Post-Disaster Christchurch, is investigating the barriers to building inclusive, resilient, future-proof renewable energy systems in a post-disaster city. Through the research so far, key risks have emerged that draw from Mataranga Māori knowledge, as well as Western scientific, engineering and legal knowledge. 4 key risk areas were identified: environmental risk, structural design of marae buildings, weak agency relationships, and the erosion of cultural skills. Each of these risks has several secondary or sub-risks associated with them. So I'm just going to give a bit of a brief background on some of those key risks in the 15-minute slot that we have here today. So environmental knowledge spans the Māori and non-Māori worlds. While the acute nature of hazard risks, such as flooding and earthquakes, was mentioned by participants, the management of these risks was constructed in a significantly more holistic and long-term perspective. In the context of climate change, for example, we currently have very locationally bound solutions to a global issue, and any mitigation attempts we have are similarly finite. It's a real threat to our coastal marae and to our sacred lands. And while there are some local examples of climate change strategy being explored by Ngāi Tahu, the Te Aroha Lakes Trust and others, we need to be more effectively harnessing our relationships and learning from other indigenous people who are experiencing similar risks and collectivise a response on our own terms. Participants discussed the difficulty in maintaining marae in a modern context. Historically, marae have been built using traditional techniques, the skills of which were passed down through generations. With the increasing complexity of modern buildings and the accompanying building codes, marae are reliant on external parties to provide knowledge and expertise on structural design. Marae communities are increasingly looking to employ expensive eco-sustainable approaches to disaster mitigation, such as embedding renewable energy infrastructure to ensure they are able to continue serving their communities in a disaster. However, these solutions are often expensive and there may be a lack of expertise in assessing what the best option may be. These are difficult decisions to be made collectively and need to be informed by best practice information. Are you, as an expert in your field, ensuring that you're presenting information in a culturally appropriate and relevant manner so Indigenous communities can autonomously be making decisions about what to prioritise for their communities? New Zealand's Civil Defence and Emergency Management is based on a coordinated incident management system, which is a global standard that allows New Zealand to connect easily with other international systems and results in hopefully a faster process for obtaining international disaster relief and assistance. At the local level, a Māori-led disaster response is able to be coordinated within 48 hours of a disaster, organised through strong familial ties and social media, with people offering their support on Facebook and other channels. There's an interdependence in the event of a disaster for marae and response agencies. Marae have been relied on by response agencies in past events to provide shelter and hospitality to the communities, while marae incur a significant financial burden providing this for their communities. The mechanism to help fund marae to provide assistance are currently murky, and navigating these complex bureaucratic systems without a trusted connection remains difficult. Instead of discussing each of these individually, we took a more holistic approach and chose to focus on an amalgamated issue, namely the absence or loss of a cultural foundation. So this was a beautiful quote from one of our participants that I think sums up a lot of the risks and tensions that a lot of us Indigenous people are feeling right now, and it really resonated with me. So we're a generation that have been brought up in the cities, and we yearn for something we don't know. What we're yearning for: who are we? Where do I belong? And what's this Māori blood running through my veins? And those things we don't know, it calls. Yes, it calls. We are an increasingly global people. Many Māori live overseas and are disconnected from their land and their marae. For many of us, our connection is enacted through digital and virtual mediums: social media, Skype, WhatsApp, learning our cultural songs through YouTube out of necessity. But can this realistically replace the importance of learning our history face-to-face, physically on a marae with our family and our elders? Will technology help enhance our cultural foundation, or will it erode the resilient values that make our communities so effective at responding to and recovering from disasters? We prepared some recommendations for an Indigenous audience that we originally had as discussion points for a particular marae we had worked with, but I think they have a much wider relevance for other Indigenous communities. So a lot of those things, I think, are shared issues that we have. Unity as a people, how we're performing collective assessments and discussions together with our families and our communities. What are our risks? We need to be having those discussions. Identifying priorities, what we can do now to mitigate risks to our marae. What funding do we have? What resources do we have to act now to mitigate those issues? Supporting our elders. What are their needs? What actions can we take now to ensure they're protected? How can we involve our youth in conversations about resilience? What do they see as risks and priorities going forward? And the relationships. How can we build stronger networks with other marae locally, nationally and internationally to other Indigenous groups to help mitigate collective risks? I would like to draw attention to an initiative in New Zealand around a more inclusive approach to disaster management and community resilience. Recent disasters have really demonstrated the importance of the Māori community on local and national levels. Māori need to be included as partners, not stakeholders, but partners in emergency management and DRR efforts. The recently produced bilingual and te reo National Disaster Resilience Strategy, produced by New Zealand's Ministry of Civil Defence and Emergency Management, is an effective international exemplar of some concrete first steps towards achieving this. I'd like to finish this presentation by highlighting some excerpts from the bilingual version of the Resilience Strategy. Firstly, the strategy's vision for a resilient nation is guided entirely by kaupapa Māori values that are placed at the forefront of the strategy as a clear declaration that Māori values are in fact central, valued and useful to our emergency management agencies. I would also like to highlight this excerpt on the right, which recognises the importance Māori have in resilience in Aotearoa New Zealand and the direct address of the Sendai Framework's priority of inclusiveness. It also directly references the work of Māori researchers to frame the concepts within the strategy. I hope that this example has been a clear call to action for other mainstream national resilience and DRR planning efforts on how to take a partnership approach with Indigenous and local communities and assert loud and clear that inclusion in DRR matters. So that's about all I have time for today, but thank you so much for attending this presentation, and please come and find me if you have any more questions about anything in this presentation. I would love to discuss it more. Hare pai atu, noho akira. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Is there any question for Lucy? Anybody? No?
Can we try kia ora one more time?
Yes.
Kia ora e hoa mā. Great, thank you.